Hello, thank you so much for joining us on yet another episode of The Digest. My name is Francesca. Now, this week on The Digest, we try to understand what causes suicidal thoughts and why there have been a number of suicide cases of late. Now, we must make mention that there is a difference between mental health and mental health illness. So mental health is your ability to think, feel, and go about your day-to-day life behaviors and emotions, meaning that all of us have mental health. There are times, depending on what life is taking us through, our mental health often goes through ups and downs. Then mental health illness, on the other hand, is because of those ups and downs. It often continues for a very long period of time, and it leads to certain disruptions in your brain's ability to function 100%, and that leads to certain concerns with your productivity. This documentary profiles people who have suffered from anxiety, stress, and depression, which are all conditions of mental illness. The past couple of months, Zambian social media and news platforms have been filled with shared posts of people threatening to and eventually taking their own lives. Most of these have exhibited either signs of depression or frustration through their social media postings. People who suffer from depression and or anxiety are the regular people that we mingle with and not know that they may be going through something because the signs are not always there. The Digest team took time to speak to some people who have had suicidal thoughts to try to understand what goes on in their minds and why. Our first guest is a young lady with a seemingly picture-perfect life and a budding career in media. One look at her, one wouldn't tell that she battles with her mental health.
My name is Amina Kaunda, and I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety in 2018.
What are some of your earliest memories of feeling depressed? Can you share that with us?
My very first memory of me feeling depressed, I think, has to go all the way back to childhood, now that I know I'm depressed, because now I can pinpoint what that was. I was always very angry, very sullen. I would have moments where I would feel unworthy, unloved. There are a number of memories that I have as a child that I can now pinpoint to say, okay, this was not normal, this was not normal. The point where I can say that I could tell that I was depressed was I had a panic attack in my car. I was by myself.
Okay, before we get to that, let's go back. You took us back to your childhood. Is there a particular way that you felt maybe you were treated, maybe different from your other siblings or your other family members that made you feel that way? Were you sort of a child who really needed attention for you to feel that way?
I was a child that needed attention, but that was not because I was not getting attention. It was just I needed a different kind of attention. When you are depressed, or especially the feelings of worthlessness, and it was very bizarre to actually feel this as a child, because children are doted on, children are looked after, children are seen in homes, but it was something where I felt unseen, and I could never tell you why. The age gap between my brother and I is about 4 years. And I do know that my dad traveled a lot. So in that, I feel like maybe there was a situation where he needed the attention because there was no male figure in the home. So maybe it was something where they were now trying to focus more on my brother. And it's kind of like, okay, you need to be a little bit more helpful. Mom needs the help. Mom needs to do this. Mom needs to do that. I would get sick, but it's like, okay, you're sick, but I need you to keep going. Even if you have a high temperature, I need you to keep going. I need you to help me. And you take that on because what else are you going to do? You kind of do need to be there for the household, essentially. And it's also something that I was trained to believe in, that women you can feel pain, you can go through whatever, but suck it up, and keep moving.
Was there a time when you tried to speak to your parents or your mother, since you're with her most of the time at home? Was there a time when you spoke to her about how you felt? And if you did, what sort of response did you get?
No. So my responses to how I was feeling were outbursts of anger, which I can now pinpoint again as symptoms of depression in a child. Children tend to have outbursts of anger because there's no other way to process those feelings. And initially, before you get to sadness, it's not a cut and dry thing, but there are some symptoms where when you can see that a child is unnecessarily angry, that's sometimes a sign as to what's going on. I used to write a sign on I remember I wrote this on a piece of paper and I was maybe 10 or 9. Took a red crayon and I said, "I am so stupid." And I pasted that on my closet and I don't remember why. But things like that, and there's a whole lot of other memories that I don't really want to get into. But there were things like that.
Okay. What about at school? What sort of relationships did you have with your peers?
I hated school. I was not somebody that made friends easily. And that was because I was very unsure of myself. And I think coming from the background that my mom came from, my mom is a social person. And she loves people. She loves to host people. She loves to go out. She likes to do all these things. And I think then having me was almost like, why don't you like going out? I remember she used to try and get me into getting into sports and stuff like that. And I was just like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to get involved. And speaking to people, I would get social anxiety. I was the quiet kid in class. People didn't acknowledge me because I didn't speak. But there was a reason behind it that I have understanding of now, but I was not the child who was extroverted. I was actually possibly extremely introverted. You get children who are introverted who can still manage, and they'll still, ambiverts. But I was introverted.
And what sort of thoughts would you usually have when, you see your friends having fun, you're out there? Why would you keep to yourself? Why wouldn't you open up and just, be a kid?
I won't call it envy. Maybe it turned into that as I got older, as I got to high school. Primary school, it was just more extreme shyness. And I don't even know if it was shyness or, you can define me as a recluse. I preferred to be by myself. All throughout primary school, I had one friend. When she moved, it was like the whole world ended because I had no one to sit with. I had nothing to do. And she knew me. And we're still friends to this day, but it was a very strange feeling to understand that now that because I have that one friend and she's gone, I don't have anybody. When I got to high school, then it became envy. And I used to think, why can't I be like you? Why can't I be extroverted like you? Why can't I talk like you? My personality. And that was when the comparison started. And I started to compare myself to all of these other kids. And I started to think, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not funny enough. Maybe I'm not all of these things that would make maybe one other girl or one other boy popular or interesting. It made me start to wonder, why am I not interesting? There's something wrong with me. Even if I'm quiet, people are not drawn to me the way they're drawn to other people. There's something wrong with me. And you internalize that and you think about it all the time. I've cried myself to sleep as a teenager.
Over what?
But over not being who I thought people would see as an interesting person. Depression is a biological disease. It's not completely on the parents. We fought more than we actually spoke. And the fighting came from me feeling inadequate, me feeling like I'm not good enough. That's as a daughter, as a sister, as a person at school, because I was not an overachiever at school. I was a pretty average student. I think that also made me feel bad. There was a lot of things in my life that made me feel like I wasn't worthy of being a person. And trying to explain that to her would almost sound like I was just being dramatic. And I always had that in the back of my head of thinking, she's going to think that I'm overreacting to the situation. She's going to think that I'm being a child or I'm being petty in this situation. So rather not just say. And this became more and more enforced as I got older.
When was the first time you opened up to your parents about how you felt? And what was their response?
I said something. I finally said something. So I went through the situation with work, with a relationship, with everything that was going on in my world. And it was a moment that everything came crashing down at once. And emotionally, I could not deal with it.
How old were you at the time?
In 2018, I was 26 years old, I think. Yeah. My math is bad. But yeah, I remember the year. And it was because everything came crumbling down at once. And, you know, a minor inconvenience like a flat tire to somebody who is not already struggling with depression would be something, okay, you know what, this happened, let me just take it to the nearest garage, we'll get it fixed and we'll move on. I'm thinking, okay, if I just keep going on this wheel and drive fast enough and swerve into oncoming traffic, I will kill myself and it will all be over. It's an extreme reaction to a very minor inconvenience. I kept thinking those things. And mind you, I've always had these thoughts. I've always thought about these things.
You've always thought about killing yourself?
Yeah. The first time I thought about taking my own life, I was young. But it wasn't about taking my own life per se. It was putting the blame on someone else. And this is the first time I'm actually going to be speaking about this ever. I don't even think I've ever mentioned this to my parents, but I do remember having rage outbursts, incredible rage outbursts. And I would run behind a door somewhere in the house and I would take a knife out of the kitchen and just hold it here. And I would stand behind the door hoping that somebody would just swing it open. Child's mind, obviously that's not possible. But somebody would swing it open and the knife would just go into my chest and it would all be over. Something like that as a 10-year-old, you know, it's dramatic, very extreme reaction to a very minor inconvenience, which was maybe me getting yelled at or I did something or we were having another fight with either my brother or my mom or something, you know. I was young, but I would not consider that as me thinking of taking my own life because, like I said, it's putting the blame on somebody else. When I first started to think about it, I would call it what I realized later was called suicidal ideation. When obviously you get older, stress becomes a little bit more difficult, school, family relationships, whatever you want to call it. You start thinking about things, and I found solace in fantasizing about death.
Amina says she would have anxiety in her sleep, something she still struggles with to date. And after all these years of feeling all of these emotions, she finally reached her final straw. And that's when she knew she needed professional help. But the first person she told was her mother. Tell us about your panic attack. What triggered it?
What triggered it? Oof. Yeah, what triggered it? Going through a really horrible breakup. And Lusaka's a very small town. And I happened to see them in traffic together. And it just didn't really, that was one minor thing. My car was also not 100%, and I couldn't work myself up to going upstairs into the office because I'm thinking I'm gonna go sit in that small space and I have to put my mind into this other space and pretend like I'm fine. My cousin had also my niece had also just passed away. And there was too many things that were piling up at one time. And the idea of going upstairs and pretending like I'm fine, because this is what I'd been doing for the longest time, is pretending. At some point the facade falls and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I called my mom. I was in the car and I just said, I can't do this. I'm not doing work. I can't do work. I'm not going upstairs. And I was crying, and then she told me to just come home. I called my boss from there, and I just told her, I'm not doing this. I can't. I tried to be as diplomatic as I possibly could, obviously. She'd given me a great opportunity to work for her, but I mentally and emotionally could just not do it. I could not physically walk up those stairs and put myself at the desk. People will not understand what that means unless they've really been in a similar headspace, but I could not. I could drive myself home because I was going to a safe space. In my head, I'm going to a safe space. I'm going back to my room and I'm going to sit in my room and I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to hide. But going upstairs to go and put on a facade for everybody was just not something that I could do.
The Digest spoke to another young lady who shared her story and has found a way to help others who may be going through depression or mental health issues. Parapalinda Chunga is the founder of Walk With Me Foundation, a not-for-profit organization dealing with mental health, advocacy, education, awareness and support through offering peer support. She too suffered mental health illness and her condition was severe, but due to Zambian culture and norms, she could not open up.
So I have lived experience with mental illness. I've suffered from anxiety. I do have chronic anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder. I also have suffered from depression, and I have gotten help for it. With my anxiety, I still do have my bad days. Even depression, I still go into bad days, but right now I think I can say that I am in a position where I know how to navigate my illness. I know how to handle it. I know how to get out of my bad days. If you really think about our lives, right? A lot of what we learn, a lot of what we do comes from the home. There's a school aspect in it, but you also learn a lot of it. You learn how to socialize from your household level first, from your home. You learn how to socialize from your community, right? So if your home is not providing you with that safe space for you to actually speak about what you're feeling, it'll be definitely very difficult for you to open up even at school, right? I can give myself as an example. So for me, I think from as early as, as far back as I can remember, maybe let me talk about Form 1, where I can say, I had very good memory of what's going on with me. And I knew that there was definitely something wrong with me, because even my anxiety was so bad before a test. It's very normal for anyone to be worried about a test or anxious about going to a new school or making new friends. You know what I mean? It's just normal. It's human nature. You should be worried. Bottling up issues is not resilience. So yes, it's very difficult to open up in our society, and yes, most definitely it contributes to us bottling up issues, and that's why we have so many teenagers that have so many problems about different things, because they don't have that safe space to speak about these issues. And in reality, if you really think about it, what children need or want, or what we all need and want, is not just financial availability from our parents or our family, right? You also want that emotional availability, someone who you can be safe with, someone who you can speak to and actually open up about it. I think it would save a lot of teenagers from depression. It would save a lot of teenagers from going through the mental illnesses that they're going through. So I would say yes, there is, to be honest, because a lot of the time suicide happens because someone is going through some sort of negative mental health, right? It's not that everyone who commits suicide has a chronic mental illness. Sometimes they're going through a period of negative mental health, not mental illness, but a period of negative mental health where they're struggling to get out of that situation, right? It might be, for example, financial problems, which is a temporal situation. And most times the causes of suicide are very temporal, something you can get out of. Even depression on its own is very temporal. If you get help for it, you can get out of it. Financial problems, temporal situation, you can get out of them. So most times, I think suicide is the last option for someone. They feel like there isn't any other solution. And in that moment, I think when you're thinking about it, in that moment when you're when you're thinking suicide is your only solution, you're not really in the right frame of mind to realize that it's a very temporal situation and you can get out of it. I'll give you an example of myself, right? I have been actively suicidal before. So after I lost my dad, I think I was bottling up so many things and I struggled to get closure. And because for the longest time already, I had bouts of depression, they would come and go, but just this one big event that happened in my life just sent me under the rock. Like, I was just completely unhappy. I was really angry at everyone and everything. I was angry about life. And I just told myself, you know what? I'm better off dead, because there's nothing that's going to get me out of this. And I was definitely like, I had an active plan to do it. I went out there, I bought the medicine, I went to the cinema, I thought it out, and I was like, okay, it's dark, there's no one there. And you'll be very surprised, the person that actually saved me is not a family member, not a friend of mine. It's the cab driver that I got into. So the cab I got into noticed that, one, I had been cutting myself. So he noticed that I had self-injury. Anyone else would not really notice, because most times people who self-injure cover their arms or they cover their injuries, right? He noticed that I was like bleeding through my jersey. My first stop was a pharmacy. He noticed that I stopped at a pharmacy. And this was 9 in the morning, and obviously he was thinking, like, why is this person going to the cinema at this time? You know what I mean? And even when he dropped me, he kept on insisting, can you give me your phone number? Can you give me your phone number? And I was like, why should I give you my phone number? Like, I don't even know you, you know what I mean? And the only reason I gave him my phone number is because he kept on insisting, and I told myself, in the next hour I won't be here, so it doesn't even matter. Like, even if I give him, he'll try my phone in an hour and he won't get through to me. So I got there, he dropped me off at East Park, and a few minutes later, like when I got into the cinema and I started watching my movie, first before I went in, there was another guy who came to sit with me, and he kept on insisting, but what's wrong with you? You don't look happy. What's in that packet? I know there's something wrong with you. And he insisted. He even came to sit with me. He wasn't supposed to watch a movie. He insisted, and he came into the cinema and sat throughout the movie with me. During my movie, the cab driver kept on trying to call me. He didn't answer I didn't answer his calls, and he sent me a message. I'll actually share it with you, so you can, yeah. He sent me a message, and he was like, you know, whatever you're going through, I just want to let you know that everything is a very temporal situation. There's someone out there that cares about you. There's people out there that are worried about whatever you're going through, and you can get help for it, or something in those lines. And you know, just the fact that a stranger had taken the time to actually speak to me about my situation, and it kind of brought me back to reality that, you know what, I'm not alone in this thing. And if a stranger can notice what I'm going through, if a stranger can take the time to help me and try to save me, there's definitely more to life than what I'm going through. And from there, I watched the movie. By the time I was done with the movie, I had calmed down, and I left the cinema and went to speak to my therapist. And I think if he hadn't taken the time just to send me that message, or even if that guy hadn't taken the time to sit with me throughout it and notice that there was something wrong with me, I would have definitely done it. And which is why, even like with suicide prevention or with suicide, we always insist that communities can help prevent suicide, because in that moment, right, you're going through some sort of negative mental health, right, and you're not in your right frame of mind, and someone just noticing, one, that you're not okay, two, reaching out to you and actually speaking to you about it, kind of brings you back to reality and tells you that, you know what, if what you're about to do is not the right thing to do, there is help available for it.
So, when you're about to start a session, when you're doing one-on-one sessions, you already do the concept. You already...
Dr. Naeem Dalal is a medical doctor specializing in brain health and mental health, referred to as field psychiatry, and he is also the public health chairperson for the Zambia Medical Association. And according to his experience, treating people with mental illness has and continues to be a challenge.
So to speak about mental health and mental illnesses in Zambia, treating people who have mental health symptoms has been quite a bit of a challenge. The main reason is that there is a lot of stigma surrounding individuals who do have signs and symptoms of mental health and mental illness per se. So that is a major challenge. But with respect to service provision here in the country, when people do understand that they have a certain symptom and this is what it's called and this is how it is supported and this is how it's treated, the reception is very positive. The people are more aware and understanding to say, oh, this is why I am feeling like this is why I am behaving like this. And when they're supported with, for instance, medication, they're very inclusive in taking the medication. When you support them with other ways of treatment like therapy and guidance in terms of saying this is what this condition is and this is how you will feel, and if you follow this practice you are going to get better, then there is a lot of reception and we have a lot of support structures and people do come forward for services. But generally the challenge or the major barrier we face is that by the time people do reach me, where I practice, for instance, at the University Teaching Hospitals in Clinic 6, oftentimes it's late. The condition has, been happening for some time, and by the time they reach me, it's late, and there's a lot of complications that have happened. But needless to say, treatment is available, and when the service is provided, people do feel better and improve.
Similar to other health conditions, the information a health practitioner will use to diagnose a condition is the information given to him by the patient. This is the case even in mental illness for a health practitioner to diagnose and come up with a treatment or therapy plan.
With mental health disorders, you actually will be assessed first of all. When you come to the hospital, you will be taken through what we call a history, where we'll ask you a few questions. We'll find out in those questions, we'll ask you when did this start, how long have you been feeling like this, and also if there is a family history, because majority of mental health illnesses actually do run in families. They are hereditary, they are genetic, So we do ask all those questions. And beyond that, we also identify any other risk factors that you may have had to actually have depression. Then in addition to that, we do what we call a full physical examination, including your mental state examination, where we are able to go through with you your thought processes, your thinking capacity, your judgment, your memory. So there's a lot that we actually focus on in that examination. Also, we do a thorough physical examination. It doesn't mean if you've just come with a mental health symptom, we will neglect the rest of your body. We actually look at all the different organs and we examine that. And then after that, we will come up with a diagnosis to say, because you have met the criteria for major depressive disorder, you have been diagnosed with depression. So for any mental health condition, when you see a healthcare worker, a mental health professional like myself, we will actually go through that process. But needless to say, there are also investigations that we do, such as blood tests, because there are certain conditions that may actually predispose to mental health symptoms. We can talk about infectious conditions such as HIV. The virus itself can go to the brain and can lead to depression. Okay, because it triggers that part of the brain. We have certain infectious conditions such as syphilis, which is very present in Zambia. So we actually do all these investigations. We'll also, if an individual has poor coping habits such as use of alcohol or substances, we will test your other organs and see if there is that correlation. So for us to come up with a diagnosis, it's quite a process. But how long will it take? No more than 45 minutes. Okay, so my first assessment with you will be 45 minutes. I will assess you, I will give you a working diagnosis, and we will go on with the support.
And when I started researching how to do certain things, that was when I went to my mom and I just said, you know what, I think I might be depressed. I think there's something wrong and I think there is a problem.
What was your mom's reaction at that point?
Her immediate reaction was exactly what I thought it would be, which is you're being dramatic, especially because it was triggered from, like I said, a really bad breakup. I think a lot of people would just dismiss it and just say, you know what, grow up, Get
over it.
Get over it. It happens. Get over it. You'll move on. You'll find somebody else. And it wasn't even about moving on and finding somebody else. It was about the immediate feelings that I was feeling at that point. And it was the way that it happened. You know, cheating on someone is never just cheating on someone. You really do break down at somebody's self-esteem and self-worth. So for somebody who already had a broken self-esteem, who already had a eroded self-worth, for something like that to happen and have the other person chosen over you, it's now something to start thinking, there is something wrong with me. What is wrong with me? Am I not pretty enough? Am I not smart enough? Am I, worthless? Can he see the person that I see when I look at myself? Is that why he left me? Am I really that bad of a person? It's those emotions and those feelings, because now what that's doing is tapping into the depression that already exists. So it wasn't even the breakup. It was the ramifications of it. And I think that's what maybe some people don't understand. So it was you're being dramatic, get over it.
Did you ever try to text your ex and say, I'm going to kill myself, or any of those things?
I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. Even in the darkest depths of my depression, I was still egotistical in saying, if I kill myself, I'm never going to say it was because you triggered something or, no. Because to me, that was attention seeking. And it was almost like saying, oh, come back to me because I'm going to kill myself. It was not that. It was wanting the pain to stop. That's what I wanted. I didn't want him back. I just wanted what I was going through to stop.
So now let's talk about your mother's reaction. Mm-hmm. You said you knew what it would be. What was it? You're being dramatic. Get over it. You're behaving like a teenager. Because teenagers they have outbursts and they cry and, I think sometimes, especially in this day and age, that can be a very misguided. Teenagers are dramatic and teenagers are just angry all the time and they're angsty. That's how you miss a lot of signs, I think. Because yes, even in as much as they are all those things, that's also where depression hides. So for me, I was that teenager. I would fantasize about what I could do to myself. Depression was hiding. So her reaction was exactly what I thought it would be, because most parents would react that way, especially if they don't understand. So you didn't speak to anybody else after that. What did you do then? So we continued the conversation, my mom and I. After, I think I started to talk more, and then she realized, oh, you're actually serious about what I'm telling you. So we discussed it, and she started to ask a few more questions. And she did have the number for a psychologist in her phone, because my grandfather at the time was going through dementia. So obviously there's counseling that you do. So she did have a number for someone, contact details, and she says, okay, you know what, we'll go to the psychologist and we'll speak to them and we'll see where we go from there. And I do genuinely appreciate that. In as much as her reaction in the beginning was not what I had anticipated and not what I had wanted, it was the pause to understand, to say, okay, she's reaching out. Something is not okay. So let's go and figure out what it is. And the next step was we went to UTH and we saw a psychologist. And then she just says, you have depression and anxiety. And I think you've had it for a very, very long time. But now we can diagnose it. So how did it feel for the very first time to open up about, what you had been feeling for years? How was that feeling for you? Like that. Because there's nothing wrong with me, if that makes sense. I can point at something and say, okay, yes, I have certain behaviors and triggers and attitudes and ways of thinking. I was always called a pessimist, or I was always told that I'm very negative. But it was almost like I can say, okay, I am these things because of this thing. So if I fix this thing, I can maybe change these things. It was a relief, because I suddenly felt seen in a weird way. Mind you, I got diagnosed at 26. It was bizarre for somebody to look at me and just say, you have depression and anxiety and you probably had it for a while. But it just wasn't something, because people will say that depression has many faces. Somebody who maybe doesn't understand would say, no, that's not true, but it is very true. It is very true. There's a lot of ways that it can show up. So, looking at, when you started now getting that, help, you finally saw a doctor. What were the next steps, and how was it for you during those days? Like, were you finally getting those thoughts out of your head? What was it like?
So the thoughts never go away. They don't go away. They're always there. So she put me on antidepressants. I don't remember the name of the medication. I was only on it for about 6 months, and I hated it. I hated it because it slowed me down. And, it makes you drowsy. It makes you very tired. You can't really function throughout the day. And it takes your body a while to get used to it. But once it is used to it, life's beautiful. You feel nothing. And it's a very strange thing to say, but it was an interesting way to feel.
What do you mean you feel nothing?
Like, the same way I was saying about extreme reactions to minor inconveniences, those minor inconveniences were minor inconveniences. I was not feeling intense emotion over something that was quite trivial. And I don't know if everybody's reaction had been the same, because this was the first time I was on antidepressants, but that was my reaction, which was I felt lighter after my body had gotten used to this sensation of, well, not the sensation, but after my body had acclimated to the medication. I felt a lot lighter, and I could see why people would abuse the medication. I can see why some people take them even when they don't need them, because it triggers the happy hormone, I think. I haven't really researched it in depth, but just from my experience with it, being on it for that brief amount of time, I can see why people would abuse it.
When you look at where you are now, how are you? How are you feeling, since you've been speaking to your psychologist?
Now I'm okay. I won't say that I'm great or that I'm fantastic or anything. It will come in bouts. And I think that's what maybe some people don't understand about how depression works. You don't just pop a pill and it goes away. You don't just move to another country and it goes away. You don't just get married and it goes away. It will always be there. And you have to kind of work through it as a day-to-day basis. I was in a state just recently where I call it the rat race feeling, where every day, wake up, you roll over onto your back, you look and you open your eyes, and it's just like, okay, here we go again. Like a lab rat. They lift the cage and you have to go find the cheese. And it's just tunnel vision. Once you find the cheese, you go back into the cage and they close it. To me, that's the equivalent of, okay, as soon as I open my eyes, the cage is lifted. Go. Go find the cheese, go make money, go do your job, go do this, go do that, go buy groceries, go buy toiletries, be a human.
But what treatment is available for mental illness following the fact that this is a condition that disrupts one's brain's ability to function at 100%? And what are the numbers like for people attended to on a day-to-day basis?
So with mental health conditions, we actually look at it at 3 factors. We look at the biology meaning your own genetics, your own physical well-being, the family inheritance, if at all that is present. So we are going to look at that. Secondly, we're also going to look at the psychology, your learned behaviors, your history of past trauma, growing up, what was your support structure, how did you grow up, what were your thought processes, your education, and all that will be taken into in terms of psychology. And then socially, we are going to look at your social factors, your support structures, your education, your background, your socioeconomic background. So when we put all these things together, this is how we are going to come up with a treatment plan tailored to you as an individual. So treatment can be medication, where medication that works on the brain to help you feel better in terms of the behaviors or emotions that you're having. So there are many different types of medications. And then on the other hand, we also have what we call therapy. Now therapy is tailored to you in terms of your background, your support structure, and then we'll instill you in therapy and we'll go you through with that. In some cases, we prescribe both therapy and medication so that you can be supported and you can be productive. People, you know what? These things will change with time. No, that will do what? That will belittle people's concerns. Okay, so it depends where I'm working from. So for the past year, I have been working at Kanyama General Hospital, where I've been seeing clinics, and on average in a day we would see from 20 to 40 individuals come in for mental health services. At UTH Clinic 6, we have more of a tertiary level specialist kind of service, so it would depend. On average I would see 6 to 7 patients, but then also seeing other patients that have been admitted in the ward. Then when we talk about outpatient clinics at Chainama, on average a mental health professional like myself would see from 20 to 40 people in a day. So there is quite a lot in terms of numbers that we see, because for us it's not just having the physical examination. For us it's actually having the conversation, communicating, and also bringing the family on board, or the social structures on board, so it takes some more time.
And to someone out there contemplating suicide, heed the advice of those that have gone through the path of anxiety and depression, conditions of mental health illness, and they have survived it. Because whatever the situation, it is only temporal.
So I think the biggest thing for me, and I always say this every time I talk about mental health problems, every time I talk about suicide, I just want to encourage whoever is going through depression, any sort of mental illness, I just want to encourage them and let them know that there is help available. There's professional help available. There's people like myself that are always willing to listen. I'm always available to listen, hold your hand through the process, let you know how I got past it, let you know how I've built resilience and how I've been helped to get out of that situation. There's always help available. So just go out there and get help. Whatever you're going through is very temporal. It can be fixed. The same way if you've got malaria, you'll go and see a doctor. So it shouldn't be any different if you've got a mental illness or mental health problem or any negative mental health issue that you're going through. Go out there and speak to someone. There's so many services available. There's free services available. There's paid for services available. Just go out and get help. To the community, I think it's so important for us to change our perception on what mental illness is and change how we look at mental health problems and just look at them very differently. And that starts with us creating awareness.
For women, I almost feel like it's sad to say that we are so hyper aware of our emotions that sometimes we label it as depression when it's not. You know, you could just be having a week of a sad day. But when it gets to extreme darkness, that is depression. So I want to talk about it more because I feel like we're misunderstanding what this is. We're wildly misunderstanding what this is. I know we're a very deeply religious nation, but we're missing the point now.
Following what she has gone through in life, battling depression and anxiety, Pearl insists awareness is key, while parents must remain key in their children's lives.
Like I said, I think the best thing is to be available for your children. Provide them with the safe space that they need. They don't just need financial availability. They don't just need you to be there to pay their school fees and provide them with food and clothing and whatever else you think is the version of financial availability. What they need is a present parent. They need a parent who's emotionally available for them. They need a safe space, someone who they can come and sit down with and talk to and actually express themselves and tell them, their parents, you know what, I think I've got anxiety. I think there's something wrong with me. I think I'm depressed. I think I'm really unhappy and I need to get help.
Everybody seems to have a solution as to how you can stop what you're feeling. Some people will say you're being dramatic. Some people will say you're overreacting. Some people may even think that you're not serious when you say certain things. The pain that you're in when you're thinking about taking your own life, it may feel like it won't end. But there are avenues, and it doesn't always have to be church. It doesn't always have to be a counselor. Sometimes it's just reaching out, and then other people can figure out how to help you. It can be family, it can be friends, it can be a stranger. I really think that we need to start openly discussing what depression is, because I don't think a lot of us know what depression feels like because it has so many faces. But just before you take that step, say something. consider saying something first.
If you're one person who is overwhelmed with your mental well-being, then there are 3 key pillars that you need to focus on with respect to your brain. The first pillar is your mood. You need to be aware of who you are. Are you a person who is bubbly, outgoing, talkative, communicating, or are you a person who is reserved and timid? When you see a change in how you feel in terms of your mood, and if that change continues for maybe 4 to 5 days or a week, then you should be one person who should tell yourself to say, okay, there is something that is changing in me. Okay, so that's your mood. You need to be aware of it. Number 2, your sleep. Your brain is an organ that requires sleep. Sleep is extremely important for you to process your day-to-day reality. If you're not going to sleep adequately, and for adults it's an average of 6 to 8 hours in a night, then that is going to cause a challenge in your mental well-being and your thought processes as well. Then your nutrition. You need to make sure that you're eating healthy. I'm not saying go out and get a diet or eat, nutritious foods per se, but I'm saying whatever you have grown up eating, make sure you don't miss your meals like your breakfast, your lunch and your supper, because your brain requires that nutrition for it to be functional in stressful conditions. So if you're one person who feels overwhelmed, try to make sure you're looking into your mood, your sleep and your diet, and if there's a change, then try to bring it back to normal. If not, then please reach out to us so that we can support you.
In Zambia, every province has a provincial hospital, and each provincial hospital has a mental health unit. So if you feel overwhelmed with respect to the way you feel, the way you act, the way you behave, then please reach out to these provincial hospitals because they have mental health units, or you can call Lifeline Zambia, which is a toll-free line 116 for psychosocial services, and you will be supported by a psychosocial counselor. For people in Lusaka, visit the University Teaching Hospital, UTH Clinic 6, Chainama Hospital, Kanyama General Hospital that has specific mental health units that are fully functioning. So we urge you to reach out and access mental health services from these facilities. Remember to give us your feedback. You can email us at documentaries@diamondtvzambia.com. Thank you so much for the pleasure of your company. Goodbye.